This is, and I can humbly say this, the most consequential housing reform that we've seen in modern history.
Let's talk about the problem state. The state with the most homeless people, the highest level of poverty, and arguably the worst housing crisis in the country. And it doesn't help that people will pay over $1 million for an 1,100 square foot shed because it's 72 degrees outside and beautiful weather year round. Yes, California. Well, I'm excited to announce they finally got this one right. California just removed the single restriction that has targeted nearly 50% of all housing developments with costly and often frivolous lawsuits. Since this law has been lifted, we could easily see tens of thousands of new housing units every year. So give it up to California, because this looks like it will actually have a massive impact. But here's the context. It's taken a housing shortage of over 3.5 million units for this to finally get the change that is needed. Even more ridiculous is that developers, city leaders, and housing advocates have all been screaming at the top of their lungs saying how big of an issue this is for the last couple decades. Even if the city leaders wanted change, it doesn't matter. The solution lies at the hands of the state. Time for the issue. The California Environmental Quality Act. CEQA is the most comprehensive environmental review process for developers in the entire country. It was created in 1970 by Governor Ronald Reagan with important environmental protection goals. Over 50 plus years, however, the application has changed significantly. In Redwood City, an affordable housing development was blocked by CEQA, and according to the developer, it was a frivolous lawsuit brought on by the neighbors. The neighbors claimed the building's height could block the sunlight that would go into their office windows. However, architect studies showed that there were no substantial changes to the sunlight for the petitioner's building. This halted development for 14 months, likely costing the development hundreds of thousands of dollars. In Lafayette, a 315-unit apartment development was blocked by CEQA for over 12 years before finally being approved. The project weathered 2 lawsuits, a ballot referendum, and over 100 public meetings. All of this forced the developer to downsize the project from 315 units to 44 homes in 2015. Eventually, in 2023, the project finally moved forward back at 315 units. If it's not obvious yet, with CEQA, you do not have to prove personal harm in order to be able to delay a project. You can just claim anything within CEQA's broad language, such as interrupting bird migration patterns, increased traffic, or potential noise pollution from students in a dorm. And yes, this is an actual CEQA lawsuit. Or consider this. You're a construction labor union, and you go to a development and say, hey, you should hire union workers for this project. When the development said no, the unions didn't just walk away. Instead, they filed CEQA lawsuits claiming the project would hurt the environment. The moment the developers agreed to hire the union labor, the environmental concerns just magically disappeared and the lawsuit was dropped. This became so common, it's got its own name. Greenmail, or using environmental concerns as reasons to shake down projects for money. And it has worked because CEQA has made it incredibly easy to file a simple lawsuit to delay projects. And this is costing developments millions of dollars while their projects sit in limbo. Since developers always say, time kills deals, even a weak complaint can be enough to stall or even kill a project. With all that said, environmental protection is crucial. I, as a developer, truly believe in sustainability and protecting the environment while also being able to create affordable housing. But this should be done through things like the Clean Water Act or the Clean Air Act or state and local stormwater rules. CEQA is about broad review and disclosure, not specific and direct regulation. To solve this issue, we need a scalpel, and CEQA acts more like a sledgehammer. Right now, CEQA requires developers to study and document how their project might affect the environment before they can ever start construction. Think of it like putting together a very detailed report of all the possible ways that your project could impact things from traffic patterns to wildlife to air quality. Then any person or group can challenge that report in court if they believe the information is inaccurate or incomplete. The challenge arises when community groups, labor groups, or really anyone that wants to, uses this environmental review process to oppose new development. The community groups who oppose new development are often called NIMBYs, or not in my backyard. NIMBY groups block developments through anonymous and repeated lawsuits, by forcing full environmental reviews, costing developers hundreds of thousands of dollars and potentially years, using settlement as a tool by making it so expensive and cumbersome and really time-consuming that developers potentially even just abandon the project, and through broad accusations of environmental impact, like parking concerns or even aesthetic changes to the neighborhood. issues that in reality have very little to do with environmental protection. In 2020 alone, CEQA lawsuits challenged over 50,000 housing units. And this is directly contradicting experts' warnings to California that they need to double their housing production rate in order to close the housing gap. As a developer with over 2,300 units, I would have never considered working in California. Navigating CEQA adds significant uncertainty, making it even riskier to develop in California. I wouldn't have to deal with any of the challenges that CEQA presents in any other parts of the country. And think about smaller developers who may lack resources for extended litigation. A CEQA lawsuit could be the end of their development career. While it is well-intentioned, CEQA has absolutely limited projects on bases that have nothing to do with the original intent of environmental protection. Personally, I can say that we were actually just in California, and I would be much more open to opportunities to develop affordable housing there now. From a simple economics perspective, housing markets operate on supply and demand. When regulatory processes limit the supply of housing, prices inevitably go up. Now, what has changed? California recognized that streamlining certain approval processes could increase housing production relatively quickly. So they passed AB 130, which creates CEQA exemptions for qualifying infill housing projects. Here's what it means. New apartments under 85 feet in urban areas will no longer face certain environmental litigation challenges. The exemption only applies to urban infill developments and does not apply to new development on natural land. Infill development means building new homes on vacant lots or replacing old buildings in neighborhoods that already exist, rather than building on farmland or undeveloped natural areas. AB 130 still includes significant restrictions from CEQA to ensure that environmental protection continues. Contaminated sites are excluded. Projects cannot use the exemption if there are already recognized environmental conditions on the site. Wetlands protection continues. Any project that would impact wetlands are still subject to a full CEQA review. Projects requiring the demolition of historic structures cannot use the exemption. Sensitive lands are protected. Prime farmland, wildlife refuges, state parks, ecological reserves, and conservation easements all remain fully protected. Environmental analysis is still required. Projects must still analyze the impacts of the biological resources, traffic, noise, air quality, and water quality, and other environmental laws apply. Federal environmental regulations, the Clean Air Act requirements, and other non-CEQA environmental protections still remain in place. The law attempts to balance environmental protection with housing production. And the law does this by focusing on streamlined approval in already developed urban areas, while maintaining protection for natural areas. This is the best type of policy change. It's one that requires no funding. It's literally just removing texts and code from the state laws and restrictions. While this is a huge win for California, any development that is funded by HUD must complete an environmental review under Part 58 of the Code of Federal Regulations. This process is honestly a black hole. Speaking from my own experience, having developed many times with HUD funding and developing affordable housing, we have gone from local HUD office to DC HUD office to Atlanta HUD office, and we don't know who to contact. We don't know where our application is. We don't know the process of the application. I've been told sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes it takes 12 months. Well, in my experience, it's typically anywhere from 8 to sometimes 13 to 15 months. And we have no idea where we are in the process at any given time. On top of that, we cannot start a project with HUD funding until we have this environmental review process completed. And if we move an ounce of dirt on site, then that will put us at risk of losing all of our HUD funding, and it'll put the entire project in jeopardy. Don't get me wrong, the environmental protection is important, but the question we are forced to answer is whether these review processes are properly calibrated for the type and the scope of each individual project. Predictability is one of the most important things in development, and it's way harder to raise funding and justify building when a law designed to protect the environment becomes a weapon, one that labor unions, NIMBYs, or even competitors will use to slow down, delay, or even kill a project. The housing crisis needs multiple solutions. There is never one silver bullet. And removing unclear and cumbersome regulation and bureaucracy is one tool among many that we need to be working on. And hopefully the effectiveness of California's approach will help influence policy at the federal level and other states. If you want to stay on top of housing policy changes that affect housing and affordability across the country, then make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I put a ton of time and effort into making this video, so honestly it would mean so much to me if you just hit the button below. I'll be following how this plays out in California and what this could mean for developers and housing nationwide. What do you think about balancing environmental protection with housing production? Should other states consider similar approaches? Share your thoughts in the comments below.